It was one of the largest, if not the largest, demonstration Hong Kong has ever seen. Organizers of the July 1st March for Democracy claim 500,000 people took part. Police estimates were much lower, putting turnout at 100,000. No matter whose count is more accurate, it was clear the parade route was packed. The demonstrations were spurred by a white paper issued by Beijing. It redefined the promise China made to respect Hong Kong's freedoms, the so-called one country, two systems formula. The demonstrators were angered that the white paper said all candidates for the next governor of Hong Kong should be vetted by a special commission before their names were put for a popular vote.
Our one country, two system, high autonomy is being threatened by Beijing when they issued a white paper claiming that all power lies with the central government. And so they may want to take away the high autonomy of Hong Kong. And so we must fight for universal suffrage to protect our system and also make it into a fairer society.
Although the march was by and large peaceful, police did arrest 500 people the next day during a sit-in. Their leaders vowed they will organize more sit-ins next month in what they're calling Occupy Central, referring to the Central Business District. To tell us more about Hong Kong's mood 17 years after reunification with China, we invited Frank Ching to join us on Skype. Ching is a longtime Hong Kong journalist and columnist. Now, do you share the demonstrators' feelings about the white paper?
Well, I think the white paper was very counterproductive. I think China put out the white paper as a warning to people in Hong Kong not to go too far. People have pointed out that the contents of the white paper are not new. Everything there has been said before. But 20 years ago, before Hong Kong returned to China, China's emphasis was on autonomy, was on two systems. Now the emphasis is on one country, on China's control. So the emphasis is totally different from before. And I would say it constitutes to some extent a reneging of the promises that China has made to Hong Kong.
Frank, the reaction to the white paper seems to be part of a growing sense of anti-mainland feeling among Hong Kong's 7 million people. What's been going on?
I think it's very interesting that 17 years ago, before Hong Kong returned to China, the sentiment in Hong Kong was all, looking down on mainlanders, if I might say that. Hong Kong people thought of themselves as being very sophisticated, much more advanced, and mainlanders were country bumpkins. Now the mainland has done so well economically that Hong Kong is reliant on the mainland for its economic growth. And Hong Kong now benefits from mainland tourism. But I think some people think that there is now too much of a good thing. There are too many mainland tourists in Hong Kong buying up everything that Hong Kong people want. And Hong Kong people feel they don't have enough space in their own home.
But what about China's attitude toward Hong Kong? You've written that Beijing doesn't feel it needs Hong Kong as much as it did when it negotiated with the British to get the territory back. Why?
In the 1970s, when negotiations started between Britain and China, I think Hong Kong was very important to China. China had just come out of the Cultural Revolution and was on the verge of bankruptcy. China needed Hong Kong for all kinds of things, especially capital, technology, business know-how. Now in the 2014, China basically has all of that. China has money coming out of its ears. It doesn't need capital the way it used to. But I think Hong Kong is still very useful for China. And a lot of Chinese companies now list in Hong Kong. They raise capital in Hong Kong. So I wouldn't say Hong Kong is not useful for China, but the degree of usefulness has gone down a great deal. But I think China now looks at Hong Kong and sees that Hong Kong in some ways is not an asset, it's a liability, because Hong Kong affects Macau, for instance. Because of these events in Hong Kong, people in Macau are now asking for universal suffrage elections. And recently in Taiwan, there was an Occupy the Legislature in Taiwan movement, which I strongly believe resulted from influence from observing things in Hong Kong, the mainland. And the Communist Party does not want Hong Kong to become a subversive base. So the people in the mainland say, well, Hong Kong can have elections, why can't we? So I don't think that Hong Kong has stopped being a model, but the mainland wants to limit the extent to which Hong Kong can be a model.
All right. Well, thank you for that perspective. Frank Ching is a veteran Hong Kong journalist and columnist. His 2010 book titled Ancestors is a biography of his family. It traces the Chings back 900 years. And as Ching mentioned, Taiwan is looking at how China treats Hong Kong with interest and even some fear. China has floated a sort of one country, two systems formula for the island as a way to bring it back into the fold. So the recent events in Hong Kong were a big topic on social media. Here's our contributor in Taipei, Cindy Su.
Many Taiwanese people can identify with Hong Kong people's desire for democracy. After all, Taiwanese people have spent decades fighting for the right to choose their president and legislators. And it was only in the 1990s and 1980s that they were able to do so. Despite Taiwan being a democratic society, some people fear that their hard-earned freedoms could disappear if Beijing is allowed too much influence over the island. That's why some people fear that Taiwan could become like another Hong Kong. Now, this person blasted Beijing's promise to the Hong Kong government and people when it took back the former British colony in 1997 that it would be allowed to govern itself under the so-called one country, two systems principle. Beijing had made similar promises to Taiwan in hopes of convincing Taiwanese people to agree to reunify with the mainland. This person wrote, "Today Hong Kong, tomorrow Taiwan. Expose China's one country, two systems lie. China keeps using the same statement for the past 50 years. It should be knocked down. Look at Tibet, Xinjiang, and especially Hong Kong. Do Taiwanese people still want to unify with China after seeing these examples? Taiwan and China are separate countries. We do not belong to each other. We are independent from each other, and we should respect each other." This writer ridiculed China for spreading its tentacles too wide and suggested that it should give up its claims on so much territory, including Taiwan. She wrote, "China is being surrounded by enemies now, which is not smart. They are facing Hong Kong's democracy issue, Xinjiang and Tibet's independence movements, and yet they still provoke Japan, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Taiwan." The demonstrations and subsequent arrests of more than 500 protesters in Hong Kong were a reminder to some Taiwanese people that they should cherish the democracy that they have. Even with similar-sized protests in Taiwan, and even rowdier and violent ones, Taiwan's police rarely arrest so many people and rarely prosecute those arrested. This person wrote, "So many people came out, which means Hong Kong's situation is serious. The reason Taiwanese people can have freedom to decide things by ourselves is because people in the past fought for such freedoms. We need to cherish and insist on democracy." Other people writing online went as far as linking Taiwan's and Hong Kong's fate together. This person urged Taiwanese people to back their Hong Kong neighbors. She wrote in parts, "I want to pay respect to those Hong Kong people who stood on the front line of democracy. Thanks for your unyielding spirit. If Hong Kong yields, then Taiwan might yield as well one day in the future. Therefore, I believe almost all Taiwanese people support Hong Kong's march. Besides, we should be careful about some people trying to cause trouble in the march to let the news media broadcast negative issues about the march. That's what happened in Taiwan before, and these people even claim to be against the cross-strait agreement on trade and services so that they could create all sorts of negative news." But some people showed a high level of confidence in Taiwan. Unlike Hong Kong, Taiwan, after all, functions very much like an independent country with its own laws, president, legislators, free elections, and a strong history of pushing for democracy. This person wrote, "Taiwan won't be the same as Hong Kong because we have different political systems. We are an independent country." Regardless of how the various sides see this issue, one thing is for sure: Beijing is closely watching the situation. Some people believe that Taiwan's recent unprecedented sunflower movement and student occupation of parliament have inspired more heated demonstrations in Hong Kong and a desire to hold its own Occupy movement there. Concerned about the possibility of Taiwanese democracy activists and Hong Kong activists joining hands, Hong Kong's authorities recently, likely under pressure from Beijing, banned Taiwan's activists from going to Hong Kong to lend support to the protesters there. For LinkAsia, this is Cindy Sue in Taipei.
Now on US airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories. World news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.